Hey everyone, um, this meeting is on studies. We're going to be talking about how to do studies and just in general, the practicing process for concept art, which is a little different than our usual meetings, but it's something that I'm really passionate about. And this is my debut meeting, so I'm going to really get into it. What are we talking about today? We're going to be talking about creating a study routine for your art and essentially how to practice, how to get better at improving and how to improve how you look at your artwork and train your eye. What are studies in the first place? I think we all know essentially what studies are from classes or homework assignments, but studies are essentially just practice pieces or sketches meant to evaluate drafting, technique, or composition from other artists or for future pieces that you're about to do. And digital studies, we can kind of go straight into digital studies nowadays, which is really nice. But way back when, golden age illustrators used to do studies with oil paint, and even further back, the art gods used to just do it with charcoal on paper. And it was a lot harder to do, and it really helped them improve. But we can use a lot of shortcuts and a lot of tricks that help us improve even faster, which I'm very thankful for. I'm going to talk quickly and kind of in a big overview about types of studies. The first type of studies, you can break it down into about 3 groups, I would say. There are drafting studies, there are technique studies, and there are storytelling studies. Drafting studies are your basics that we learn in way too many classes here at school: your perspective, your anatomy, proportion, gesture, and silhouette, which are all things that you can almost quantify how good you are getting at. It's a little bit easier to tell if someone is drawing realistically or accurately, or if someone has a fine handle over proportions. It's kind of easy to measure. Technique is something that's a little bit harder to measure. It's focused on process, brushwork, shape design, texture, and material. Learning how to render material and insinuate it with your brushstrokes and learning how to create appealing shapes is something that is a bit more personal to every artist, which as concept artists, we have to take into account when we are designing. Finally, and most importantly for us as concept artists, we can do studies for storytelling, where we learn how to approach composition in a more engaging way. We learn how to stage shots, and we learn how to stage keyframes for visual development. We can learn to study value, how to create better value structures, and how to make the eye look where we want it to look. And we can also study color, which is just bootleg value. And we can look at rhythm in our paintings to give it that really nice, clean, concise factor that you see in professional illustrators' work. So this example is the same shot, the same exact building, but painted in about 12 different ways by Nathan Folks, who is an amazing artist. And just by using different lighting techniques, he can give his client different moods and establish a different story with each of these pieces. By the way, if there's anybody, I can't really see the chat, so if there's any images that people want to know the artist of, because this is all about studies and you could do studies from everyone in here, just ask and maybe we can figure it out. This next piece is the Ryan Lane Hulk, which is one of my favorite things to look at and talk about, because I just love how he just painted a very identifiable figure with just pure silhouette, really rough brushstrokes, and maybe 3 values. You can tell that it's the Hulk. You can squint your eyes and you can tell the lighting with just white, a middle value, and darks. And it's just so masterful how he worked it. And the story is there and it's very concise, which as concept artists, we're trying to create things quickly, effectively, and easy for the viewer to read. There are 2 different types of studies outside of those that I would also include. They're kind of just honorable mentions. There are stylization studies where you can study the style of another artist and learn how they think, what their process is like. Something to be really aware of is that a lot of professional artists went through the realism process already. and they have took it and they make their own choices. So when you're studying an artist, look at their process, why they make the decisions that they make, why Leyendecker decides to emphasize certain anatomical features over others. That's something that takes a lot of practice to learn instead of just copying it for random sake. There's also visual library studies where you can learn from historical images, from fashion, learning about the scientific function of an animal or certain types of anatomy. And this is more focused on knowing the process and knowing the function of what you're trying to study. Basically, not trying to take these two ways of studying at surface value is what will get you better results in your studies so that you know how things work and the mechanics of what you're trying to look at. So that was kind of a lot, and I did go through it a little quick. Don't get overwhelmed. Not every artist has to do all of these things to become a great artist. And I've definitely not done as much as I need to, but we take it one step at a time. Wherever you want to go is what you will decide to study with. Just now, a quick note on when is copying okay. Copying is kind of a tough subject when it comes to studies. I think that sometimes it is okay and sometimes it isn't. In hot take, I think that if you're going to be studying anatomy or if you're going to be studying drafting, it is almost always better to learn from looking at things and training your eye. If you're going to be studying something involving storytelling or something involving composition or technique, to save you time in your study, it could be very beneficial to just trace out a sketch of the head of a lion, and then you go in and you focus on your brushwork. As long as you know what you're focusing on. If you're focusing on anatomy and you're tracing, it might not be the best for you to trace all the time.
You mind if I hop on this real quick?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So the best way to look at any of these resources that we call cheating, like the tracing, the taking an image, breaking down into shapes, it is okay to do them if they are tools. If you already know how to do something and you are just trying to implement it so you have a faster process, great. That is concept art. That is our pipeline. We are supposed to have our deliverables very fast. If you are relying too much and that tool is now a crutch, take a step back and start doing studies and stop, because you don't want the tool to become the crutch, because if that tool is then taken away, then you are left crippled and feeling like you aren't an artist, and like a lot of bad things come with that. Versus if they are tools and you're like, you know what? I don't need these tools. I got my own chops. I'm sick as heck. Yeah. That's just a good little TLDR or whatever on the whole cheatiness thing. The moment that you are abusing it and using it too much and relying on it too much, it's best to take a step back and stop.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I could not have said it better myself. As long as you know what you're doing, basically. And here's an example. This is a project I did like a year ago in Anatomy and Perspective, where we were allowed to trace to learn the musculature of these people and these poses. And it's not like we're studying gesture, where maybe tracing a gesture would be less beneficial. It was extremely challenging, and it was not a crutch to work on top of these pictures and try and learn. And it was extremely helpful in learning the anatomy and the names and where muscles go and insert. Why study? It seems like an easy answer. I would say mainly to improve, and I'm sure everyone here thinks mainly, oh, I want to improve on my art. But I think there are more benefits to doing studies than just always the grind. And it can be good to look at it as doing warm-ups before you get on with doing art. Maybe you do 30 minutes to do a sketch, do some head sketches. Maybe you just do pieces that you really enjoy and you do take 30 minutes a day to do it, or you just throw a bunch of paint on like a new canvas and just like go crazy. It's studying helps you relax, and you can even turn it into fan art. Like these pieces by Devin L. Kurtz are, I always love her studies because she turns her study processes into ways to make fan art and to do posts, and she's extremely successful at it. So there are more ways to look at studies and improving. I think it's like a key aspect of every artist to have studies incorporated in it, not just for the grind, but also as a healthy balance between normal pieces and study pieces. And at the end of the day, studying is very personal to you. There's no other way I can say this, and everyone needs to remember that. Knowing that whatever I say about what you should be doing to study is all indicative and all up to the person. If you think you need to be studying anatomy, or if you feel like you don't need to be studying this, or if you want to look at this artist to improve, it's all in your own journey. So who should you study? Easily, you could study anybody, but I would focus on one thing. And it could maybe be drafting, technique, or storytelling, maybe. And I would list the things out that you're going to be studying on. Here's an easy method to find people to study from, which I like to use to find new inspirations and new people, new artists that are really interesting to me, that I love their style. One of my favorite artists a couple years ago was Evan Mel Munson, and I looked up what his biggest inspirations was. And one of them was Carl Kopinski, another was Paul Bonner, and then the rest. And then I started looking into these people, and then you just keep digging back further and further. And it's great ways to find how the artist you're studying thinks, what their process is, why they make those decisions, and figuring out new people that you can study from that were doing what you want to do maybe like 50 to 100 years ago. Now, this is Concept Art Club. We could be doing studies for anything, and studying at the end of the day for us concept artists helps us become better problem solvers. And at the end of the day, what we do as a concept artist is be a problem solver. And we want to improve our visual libraries. We want to get better at working with our mechanics, working as artists. Everything will come in to help us as a concept artist in the industry. It all feeds into each other. This was all planned out. The drafting portion, the drafting studies are inevitably going to help us as concept artists become better with character design, with environment design. Working with some of the drafting and some of the technique studies is going to make us better at environments, and polish is mostly going to be storytelling and technique, and it all feeds into each other. And all the studies that we do feed into what we want to do as concept artists. When you lay it out like this, it's almost, I have always been thinking about this, and it's almost self-explanatory. Like, yeah, if I want to be a character designer, I want to get better at anatomy. But I think when you lay that out and you say to yourself, okay, I want to be a character designer, let's work on anatomy, proportion, gesture, and silhouettes. Let's do some anatomy studies this week, some work on proportions next week, and doing silhouettes. The path to doing what the art that we want to see is a lot clearer. So we're going to get into some tips for studying. I can't say I'm a professional at everything that we've been talking about, but I can certainly teach ways for getting better at painting and getting better at values and getting at least more out of your studies when you're looking at composition and storytelling and technique. The first thing I'm going to say, and I've said this already in the presentation, but know what you are going to study. Write it out immediately. Bullet it, like just write it at the top of the canvas. Just have it down, because no matter what, when we get into art mode, we're going to start rendering out details and we're going to be throwing values in there. Maybe we're going to go to color and it's not focused. And that's okay if that's your process. But when we're trying to study, we're trying to learn effectively. And that's what's going to help us at the end of the day do this faster and do this better. Here are some film and painting studies that I did. And I kind of go a little too rendery with it. Like, I should probably eat my own words there. But I was mainly looking at what in the piece was the focal point, what is going to be your reads, what three values are there. Is it shadows? Is it local values? And we're going to get into all this, but I just wanted to show that it's doable. This all took me probably like each piece took me about an hour. So we're going to get into it. This quote has meant a lot to me since I heard it, and I've always been intimidated by painting, but I think it really helps take the stress away from going into color and getting really rendery. Black and white does all the work, and color takes all the credit. It's something that when you look at a piece, the next painting that you look at and the next film that you watch, I want you to look for the values and just don't look at the color. The colors could be pretty, but I just want you to look at the values, and you're going to see that this quote is right. Here is a pretty great example of that. The front circle in each of these is like a pure white, 100% white. The back rectangle is probably like a darker gray. And the medium square changes in value in each of these. And in the leftmost one, the medium square is maybe like equal distance between the circle and the rectangle. The middle image, it's a lot closer to the circle. And the last image, it's closer to the rectangle. And that's purely told through value. This is like the most effective tool ever for like a concept artist who's working in environments or is trying to paint something, because you can easily tell someone the distance between things, overlap, and emphasize certain aspects just through the value alone. Here's another example, but it's in color. And color muddies things up. And the middle one it's a closer hue to red. The last one is a closer hue to green. And you can't tell whether something is closer or not. It's kind of hard to look at. The value is the same across the board, and it doesn't tell us as the viewer anything effectively at all. This first one is so much more clear at establishing a foreground, a middle ground, and a background right away. We're going to be using this concept for all of the value study. I've used it for all the value studies that I do, which is the 3 value method. And it's the same as the circle and the rectangle and the square, where you separate what you're looking at into maybe 3 values. Just simplify it. Like, you don't need anything more than that. And then the relationship between those 3 values will tell how close or far something is away, the overlap, and this is all structured in a good piece, in a good painting, in a good film, in a good keyframe. The interplay between just a middle gray, a black, and a white is all that you need. The squint test. This is like the biggest art hack that I've ever heard from and I've ever learned. Squinting at this piece, just do it. Squint real hard and look at where the emphasis is in this frame. It's pretty close on the left to her face. And this image is cut off, but there's light shining in from the window all the way on the left side of the frame. And Carl on the right is a bit more in shadow. There's black silhouetting behind him, and there's a little light behind his ear, but we mainly immediately dart towards her face. In black and white, the lightest values are on her face. The closest, maybe the second read, is behind Carl's head, and the black on the right serves as good framing and good contrast for all the light on the left side. This is a very well-structured image. I mean, it's Pixar, so it's a very well-structured value. Here's an example of something really poorly valued. And now try and squint your eyes really hard and think where the focal point is. It's like kind of, there isn't one. They overvalued everything. There's too much contrast everywhere. There's really bright values on the gnome's head. I haven't seen whatever this is from. There's really bright values on the fairy's head. If you throw it in black and white, you can see like it's all muddy in like the middle grays. And it's easy once you start thinking about this to see this in your own paintings. Like, it's easy to, when you're painting something like this, think that it looks like fine because you've been looking at it for a long time and you want like a good amount of grays and values and you don't want to go too far into white, too far into black. But I promise that going here, having a lot of light on the right side, on the left side, and having a lot of black on the right side tells a better story. This goes into what I've already been talking about. You want to establish your first read and then your second, maybe third reads, and knowing what the story focuses on when you're looking at pieces to explore and study from is going to be really helpful in telling what the thought process of the director or the cinematographer or the artist was going through. In these studies for Riven, you can tell that the emphasis is mainly on her. There's a lot of darker values around her figure, and then there's something like the moon or light from the moon or her sword that kind of frames her, and there's a lot of great reads here. And in the final, her sword is the main light source. You can squint your eyes and you can immediately kind of dart there. Maybe you dart the second one up to the moon, which leads you back to that side of her face, which is lit again. And it's all kind of just a circular pattern of this lighting that frames Riven very solely in the center of the image. And it's all purposeful, and you can learn how to do this by doing studies and learning how people think of black and white values. Because the colors are pretty here, but it's the values at this stage that sells the splash. So simplifying shapes. This is something that will help when you're doing studies and not getting bogged down in the details of a painting or a piece that is really overcomplicated. If you're doing a study of a building, you could separate it into 3 values, and then you could simplify these shapes. And if you notice in both of these, they read equally well. There's lines that lead you in, and it's framed, and there's a little bit more detail in the center, and it sells the story of the shot, even though it's only 2 values. And that's all you need in a finished illustration anyway. Now, I guess quickly on texture and brushwork, because we are doing studies on storytelling, but with black and white value studies, you're also inevitably going to learn about composition and get into technique. I did this study on the right like a year ago, and I really liked it, but focusing on brushwork is just about focusing on your basic shapes, focusing on, like, if a circle was lit, a sphere was lit, where would the line cut off? Where would bounce light hit? And this is something that could be a whole other meeting. We could have a whole other meeting about texture and brushwork and how that informs things, but just basically focus on how your texture and how your brushwork is going to sell your values, which you've already been thinking about values selling the story. And you want it to be a supplement. You don't want everything to be about the texture, and you don't want everything to just be values all the time. Hard edges versus soft edges. This is a bit of a harder concept, but I would think of the painter or whoever you're studying the film from, what their thought process is. And inevitably in a set, you're going to have props and you're going to have like extraneous details that give the viewer's eye to wander. And as artists and as concept artists, we can use that texture to give the viewer places to wander. When I did this, I was using a lot of texture to fill in for the texture of the door, the texture of the mirror, of the back wall, but really it's like all basic shapes. I didn't add like things on the window or like every individual panel on the door or even like the framing of the window. So it all adds up. And when you're looking at hard edges versus soft edges, having a rhythm, which you'll get used to the more you do studies like this, having a rhythm of where your hard edges meet, where I wanted the boy's face to feel like it was the first read. It's a very hard black edge against white. And then there's only a couple other hard edges that kind of just lead you into that one. It's focusing on where you want the viewer's eyes to lead. And when we're doing studies, we have to think about where the painter or the artist wanted people's eyes to go. You have to deconstruct their process, basically. This is just a quick note, which I'll be talking a lot more about when I do a demo about this topic, local value versus shadow value. With local value, there's contrast due to just the local value of the objects. Like in the left piece, it's more there isn't really shading. There's contrast between the man's hair and his shirt, like through texture and through just value separation. But in the right piece, there's contrast due to lighting and shadows, where the right side of his face is lit and the left side of his face is completely in shadow, and that provides interesting detail and contrast that leads us in. So just a note on the differentiation between values, but when I get into doing the study, I can show how that will affect us. Here's another example of local value in just everyday art. I love this artist, and she uses local value amazingly. There really aren't a lot of shadows in this. It's mostly just the local value of the armor and her face, but she is so much brighter than everything else just locally, and it makes a really graphic image. It's very flat. Here's another piece by the same artist, and the knight is underneath this giant creature and swathed in this shadow, and there's a little bit of light poking through, which creates that really interesting focal point. And this is a lot more of a shadow value piece and how it can provide the same exact interesting contrast and dynamic image, but through just a different method, which is just something to think about when you're looking at pieces to study from. So that was my whole entire spiel. If anyone has questions, I'd love to answer them, but we're also going to get into a demo where I'm going to show my process and everything that I've kind of been talking about applied. So here we go. Let me exit out of this. Stop streaming for a second. Okay. All right, here we go. So yeah, if anyone has any questions while I get this set up, you can ask, because now I can actually see the chat. But I did this study earlier. Yeah, it was just a practice. I'll do one of a different piece though. This is from 1917, which is a pretty amazing movie. And great, like absolutely great for getting inspiration and practicing drawing keyframes. So my process for starting doing a keyframe painting like this is I just immediately getting the dimensions right is extremely important, a lot more important than you would think. And it helps with just placing. So all I really do is I just control click on the little thumbnail of the image, and it gives you a perfect outline of it. And then I can make my canvas from there. And then I just lock it, and I'm just going to be doing it on one layer to make it simple. So first off, we're only going to be using 3 values. If you guys want to do studies along with me too of anything, like it's totally fine. This is just going to be chill. I'm going to be doing just 3 values of white, of 50% gray, like a perfect 50% gray, and then black, which is already there. The first thing I like to think about is the background. Oh yeah, sure. Here, I will drop it in. Here's the image. And I'll give everyone a second to, if they want to grab that. Tesla, that is not a Gardner quote. I don't know where it came from. I heard it in a... Really? Well, Gardner knows what's up. That does not surprise me. Yeah, she did upload earlier today. I was considering using that piece that she uploaded because it had pretty great local value. Amy Thompson is amazing. Okay. The first thing I like to think of is this in local value or is it in shadow value? And immediately it's easy to tell that this man is not actually like a burnt umber, like black color. This is going to be in shadow value. And I'm going to list out some things that I want to focus on. I want to focus on his silhouette. And I want to focus on... I really like this effect of the fire coming from the building. And I feel like I barely ever painted fire. So I'm going to focus on the fire effect. And that's going to be it. I'm going to try and keep it super simple. Okay. First thing I do is I look at the background about like right there. That background is about like maybe that's going to be my middle value. And my blacks are here, 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 and this will be my lightest. I would highly recommend doing this too. Like just like draw all over it. That's going to be a middle value thing. I really like that shape. I like that shape too. That's probably like a little closer to 1, but I'm just going to say 2 to keep it simple. I'm just mainly trying to make it as simplified as possible for me so that when I get into painting it, I can understand the process of how they shot this. It's a great like center shot, and the light is framing him like really beautifully, and I want to be able to get that. So that's about where the background starts. I'm just gonna set that up right there. And then I've got this like fountain, which is like right here, which is also... I use the lasso tool like a lot because it just helps me not have to draw things out, especially when you're painting. I feel like you don't need to draw things out too much unless you're doing like a crazy illustration or something. But this is just a study. I do not care about that. I'm gonna draw out whatever that thing is. And this section over here with the clouds and the smoke is like, I would say it's like squarely in 2 as well. And I'm just gonna lay that in. What really helps with this brush that I'm using with a lot of texture, and I could send it in the chat if people want it too, is it has transfer. So I can kind of just use these 3 values and just tap light to get a little bit less and tap more to get a really solid 50% gray, which helps me like make these pieces look really finished really quick. Okay. say there's maybe some right there too. Just like the little parts of the building. Cool. Now I'm going to focus on my darker values. This is about where it's going to come a lot more together because we have the silhouetting of these like arches on the side, which let's say it's just like that because that is so dark to make that easier to see. There we go. And to get hard edges, I like to just use the lasso tool. Just makes it really easy. There we go. That's about right. And right in the center is going to be my man, which you can be really rough with. Like, you can always fix it later. Like that's about it. And then like kind of a circle for his head. If you hold shift, you can just keep adding on to the lasso tool, and it's lifesaver. If you hold alt, you can cut away from it slightly. So I kind of just like to sculpt it out. Yeah, that's about it. That's about right. It's okay if it isn't too. Cool. And then do this little strap. All right, now I'm going to work on getting these windows. I got his silhouette down, which is an extreme black, and these arches down, which is really cool. Actually, I can add a little bit more to this because there's this section. Now I'm going to focus on the windows. Which I'm just going to lay them in right now, like really roughly. And then I can always go back over it with white because the light is kind of taking up the atmosphere over there a lot more than the solid hard shapes of the windows. This is an area outside of this silhouette that I want to be really soft to make him pop out as much as possible. And there's some windows down here. I'll turn that off so I can see a bit better. Okay. Now, I'm just going to take this white and kind of go over a lot. That light really, really bleeds through here. And it's okay if things start getting lost because you can always just go back over and refine it. There's some like light peeking up here, which is really cool. It's like traveling down across the pavement up to him, which is just a really cool way to light it. I also don't think I mentioned this, but I try to stay really zoomed out, like all the time. Like if this is about like where I want to stay zoomed out the entire time, so that I'm not getting super caught up in the details.
That's a good note that Wimmer told me when I was taking one of his classes. Is that, you know, you can always go in and refine things, but like working from big to small will help you avoid like wasting time rendering out like every single chain link in a chain vest when you zoom out and it's like, wow, I can't see any of that.
Yeah, 100%. And there's also just no stress in it. Like I just redid this fountain that I did at the start, and like that's okay. It probably is going to look better now. Reestablish that. And there's like a guy here. I actually, when I squint my eyes like really hard right now, that this fountain actually kind of leans more into black. And this area over here actually leans more into black a little bit more because it's like right silhouetted. It's still silhouetted by that. So it might. And just like have a little bit more black in there, just like real light. It might be even too much. And on these edges over here, with the smoke, it also leans a bit more into black, which will help me get a full range of value across the whole thing, which just makes it look a whole lot more refined than just simple shapes. There's a guy here which I keep forgetting to put in. There he is. On that zoom out note, a great way to see if it's working is to zoom out like a lot. Like from zooming out here, I can see that down here, I want it to be just a bit more. Down here, I want it to be a bit more lighter. And here, I want it to be a bit more darker. And it should get a little more darker up here. I didn't go far enough. I assumed because when they were shooting this with how bright it was and just how intense this kind of movie gets on screen, that they just wanted the focus to be right on him coming out, like this moment. So it's almost like vignette around the arches. probably actually going into like noodling territory right now. And that is when I try to stop myself. So I would say that's like close to done.
When you say noodling, do you mean like fussing over like details?
Yes, yeah. Like the fact that I like zoomed in there before, I zoomed in here and I was like going in, like I just did it instinctively. That's a good sign that I'm in my like rendering mode, not in my looking at the values mode. Okay. 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 There we go. I would say that's about it. That's about done for that one. Oh nope. Yeah. Like I would call this one done. I have another to do, which is way harder. But if anyone has any questions, I'm taking a chill pill for a second. Also, I know the Mark Holmes is in like 5 minutes, the Mark Holmes presentation. If people want to go to that, that is totally fine. You could really get like into this. Like I tend to get into this, but I think it's really like therapeutic, just like zooming in and out and just thinking like, oh, they left some cloud here and they left some cloud here, because all of this is totally on purpose. Like these are really professional sets. Just fun to see how they think. And since it's in shadow, it's a shadow value piece. Most of it is going to be silhouetting and things being put in shadow by other things, and this giant light doing that. So it's kind of a bit easier to take on. I have another piece which is in local value, which is I think going to be pretty hard. So I'm excited to do that one. Okay. See. Here we go. No. There we go. So same process. I'm just going to make sure the framing is completely right and I'm at the same dimensions. This is a piece by Ryan Lane, which I'll draw up in our chat. If anyone wants to do that, or if they're still working on the first one, it's totally fine. Because it's this, the same things are going to apply. Here we go. This is a piece by Ryan Lane for Moana. It was like a visual development piece. And it's in local value, which is kind of really hard to take on. There aren't really a lot of shadows. Like I can see some shadows here and maybe some like blacks here and there, but it's really mostly just if you squint your eyes, the contrast of these darker forms leading up to this medium form is mainly insinuated by like the natural color of these rocks and the natural color of this like giant crag thing. Because unless it's a keyframe, because Ryan Lane does amazing keyframes and they are in shadow value, unless it's a keyframe, like you tend to not want to do environment design in some crazy lighting scenarios and people aren't going to understand that, oh, this is green. Well, but anyway, trying to differentiate these values, first of all, local value. Oh, sure. So I'm using just like one brush. It's just this giant texture brush, and I could give it to you guys if you want. It's from Airy Pan's brush pack from her schoolism course.
Oh no, you committed the forbidden sin. You offered up free stuff.
Yup.
You're not ready.
Of course, Joy. Thanks for coming. Yeah, like genuinely, I get it. Like that's a great opportunity. The EA presentation. Yeah, let's go. That's so cool, Nala. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I will later. I will send a link in the resources, like a drive link, and y'all can grab it. Because it really is a great brush. It's like it's one of my. It has quickly become one of my favorites. Okay. Here, I'm trying to think of, since it's local value, a lot of the changes in yeah, a lot of the changes in value are going to be from just the natural, like this beach is going to be, I'm going to call it 1. I'm going to say this is 1. 1 here. I would, this one's hard. I'm going to put this in like 2. I put this entire crag in 2 and maybe a little 3. This background is probably 2, but I will probably experiment with that one. This is more of a 1. And then these guys, these giant crag shapes are totally 2s with a little bit of 3. And the C, mostly 1s. But something, when it's really difficult to tell values like this, something I like to do is look at values next to each other. So this beach has to be a 1. It's, if you squint your eyes, it's the lightest value on the canvas here, which means that this portion right here, which is a darker value, you could say that it's a 1. It's close enough. This section before it is definitely a 2. It's way far. Some of these crags go under the water, and some of the area over here leans a little bit more to this value over here, which is a 2. So I would say this area over here is also a 2. But I'm just going to go into it because I'm drawing all over it. Okay. I'm going to start with just this midpoint right there. And then if you go up to the lasso tool and you hold it down, you can change it to the polygonal lasso tool. And it's like a godsend. Here, just gonna work on the background, not even gonna touch the crags and the very intimidating values of the beach. And then I would say that like this area maybe gets a little close to, maybe it's like a little bit of 2, mostly 1. And then this area, I don't know if that's right. Yeah, close enough. Maybe it's like that. Oh. Now, we're gonna think. It's old. This is like way skewed, actually. Wait. No. But it's okay, because we can fix it. It's not a big deal. I'm actually going to pull Psych, and I'm going to work on the background behind this. Because I think it's like a 2 up here, and 2 over here. And then there are these like, these clouds, which are definitely a 1 in general. And there's like micro values in here with his brush strokes, but if you squint your eyes, you lose it completely. So there's just no point in trying to work it out unless you're trying to make an exact copy. Then the bottom is reflected off of the sky, which I established the sky is going to be a 2. So I should add back in this little 2 at the bottom of these clouds. There we go. Yeah, okay, cool. I like my favorite part of doing studies is the part where you're like, this is kind of coming together and like you get really into it. You're like, yeah. It's a lot less stressful than full on pieces. With that, I'm gonna fix up the shape. I kind of insinuated it before. But here we go. And then a little rock over here. Yeah, close enough. Now, this beach is 100% going to be white. It's super light. I think with his focal point, as I'm painting this out, I'm kind of figuring out why he chose to do this range of values, even though there isn't like some god beam coming down on this rock. He really worked on showcasing and making this concept of this crag and what could look like in the movie look really good. He silhouetted it out against the sky very subtly. I mean, he is a master. With that, I'm gonna finally throw some black in there. There really isn't a lot, so I'm not gonna try and overdo it. Like just throwing it in. Like you put it down, you can take it out. Now working the gray back in. I really like painting like this too because it's just so like sculptural, and you just work back in, working back and forth. I honestly like don't work this sculptural in like my actual pieces, and I feel like it's like not good. Like I feel like I could do better when I'm working on like real pieces to remember it's okay to like leave things in and sculpt it out. Okay, I'm noodling on that. No. Now I'm gonna work on these crags in the front, which I've been putting off because they kind of scare me. That's okay. They're just rocks. I love this little perspective he does on it where he like really makes it super tiny, like leading your eye in. A little more. I'm losing it. There we go. Okay. So I said this was a 2. I said these crags were a 2, and that might work. I think that works. But if it is a 2, I definitely need to be a little less crazy with the black going in on it. Yeah, Nala, you're crazy. That was a great choice, doing the little gray and black thing that I'm about to do here that I thought of myself. Nice. That looks cool. Now I'm gonna kind of get into details just because I like really like where it's going. Like I feel like the shapes are all here. There's maybe like 1 or 2 up here. The shapes are all here. Like if you put it next to each other, it still reads. And I'm just gonna go in on some details because I like it. And all the pieces that I showed that I did like a while ago, I do the same thing, which is why they look so refined. But you totally don't need to feel like you need to refine all your studies. Like if that's going to put you off from doing studies, like having to make them look good, then don't do that. Just do what you want. I really like this like wave crashing effect over here. Like he just like creeps in with that white again to like ease your eye through, like leave that motion in. Like I just love that so much. So I'm gonna take it. I guess my island was floating. I didn't even notice that. Oops. But that's like not a problem. Floating islands are kind of cooler anyway. Cool. I think it's mostly there. I think I'm losing some of the black on these rocks. And I think there is maybe a point here where it kind of fades into each other a little more. That this becomes darker because that edge is really hard. This edge up here is really hard edges. Just very lightly, like reinforce those edges. Of course, Nala, thanks for coming. Thanks for doing the studies. They looked so good. Like, I'm honestly honored. Yeah, this is coming along. I'd say this one's done. I say that, and then I see issues. I'm going to push this a little bit more into the grays. The 3 values, like, I can tend, and it's easy to tend to over-render into it, but that's also an easy way to, like, lose your focal point. And I think I was over-rendering the white of the waves back here, and I was losing how white the beach is in the back. So I'm just going to reestablish that. There we go. That's a bit better. Of course, thank you. Thanks for coming. Oh. Cool. So I could do another. I would totally be down to do another, like a really hard one. Because these are coming along a lot quicker than I thought they were. Usually these take me like an hour, but they're kind of coming out pretty quick.
You've just gotten better, Ethan.
That's crazy. I'll do another one just for fun while everyone's leaving. Taking out the big guns. Forrest, thanks for coming. Come on, what just happened? Okay, this is hard, but it's fine. Gonna break it down. There we go. If I squint my eyes immediately, this shape is like there. This is what he wanted. Sergeant was like, this girl is gonna look amazing. You're gonna look right there first. It's my one. I can tell I think it's very subtly shadow because there's this shadow area here, this 3, which is on the shadow area back here, this 3, which is on the same like plane as the front grass, which is more like a 2. Her foot is like hidden there. And it's very smart. He's trying to silhouette the girls to be the first 2 reads. She's a bit more in shadow. She's like more of a 2 down there. And then all these flowers are like up here, they're more 1s. They can kind of stand on their own. But down here around the girls, they're more 2s because he knows like that's what he cares about the most. I'm actually gonna just start with like making it like a middle gray because there's a lot of it. Like there's really barely any white in here. I'm gonna work on just this background area. Like throw it there. Oh, I keep doing that. I think like the middle section of it is a little bit darker, so I'm just gonna do that. And then this front area is a bit more in the grays. I'm just gonna like very subtly like go crisscross, just like push it up. And up here, I'm very subtly just gonna go crisscross. And I can always fix it. It might not be completely right, but it's a very complicated painting, so it's not gonna be right at first. Then lay her in. And she is like, she's totally a 1, but since it's a painting, just doing the 1 white value is not going to be enough. It's going to require a lot of just like back and forth here on this. A lot more rendering detail than the film study was, which was kind of mostly like silhouette, and then the Ryan Lane study, which is very kind of simplified. He simplifies his shapes already for you. about like right there. Way too close. It's also like huge. I'm gonna carve into her because she is like way bigger than the other girl right now. And it also works out because around her is silhouetted the darker values. Now I'm gonna do little lanterns. Which at the bottom is actually like real close to light. She got an arm missing. That's cute. But I'm not super worried about proportions or like anatomy. It's like not a big deal. And I think I can return some light on her dress because she is like she seems way too far. Yeah, I think that keeps her generally like close enough, but not overtaking the main goal. Man, this is hard. Sergeant was a guy, huh? I'm just gonna add a little bit of black in there just because like I want to look full range of values like how Sergeant would have wanted it painted. He would have worked in different layers though. Wow, let's go. Will, that looks so good.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just kind of doing a Landecker study the entire time. As soon as you threw up that picture of Landecker, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do a Landecker study.
You know, why not?
I'll just get it done.
Yeah, that looks amazing.
Thank you.
What were you focusing on? Just like getting the style right?
Not really. I think I was more so focused on like how he's doing. I don't know. I think I was kind of focused on how he was doing his shadows a lot. That's what I was really looking at.
Yeah.
Especially like the best thing about this isn't the face. I think what I learned the most from was doing the little like neck piece. I don't know what to call that, like a collar.
Yeah.
I think I nailed the collar.
Oh, for sure. Like the strokes there.
Yeah, just like a lot of the way that he's playing with emotion and just like selling it so well.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like I didn't nail it, but like
that's okay. You got
it's
there.
Landecker. Of course, you're not gonna nail it.
100%.
Tessa, you did you do anything?
This is working on our comm homework right now, I bet.
What?
I'm doing homework, so I didn't tag along for this one.
No.
Tessa, I was just making a joke that you're working on our
Yeah,
comm
no,
homework
it doesn't
right
matter.
now. Yeah, it's like most people are gone.